Professor Duflo hardly needs an introduction, having won the 2019 Nobel Prize for Economics for her work in development economics. Only the second woman to receive this award and the youngest economist overall. She's professor of poverty alleviation and development economics at MIT and co-founder and co-director of the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, or JPAL. Her research focuses on microeconomic issues in developing countries, including household behavior, education, access to finance, health, and policy evaluation. She has published extensively in top journals like the American Economic Review, Econometrica, the Review of Economic Studies, and many more, including science and medicine-based journals. Today, she will share her insights with us on how we can make the economics profession more inclusive, drawing on initiatives underway at JPAL. Professor Duflo, you will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes. We will then open up for questions. Thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm very glad to be here and to be part of this project. Indeed, making economics more inclusive is one of the most important things that we should be doing at the moment, because economic is not inclusive. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the problem, then I'm going to talk a bit about one solution, which is the Economic Transformation Project and the DEDP Blended Masters. So what's the issue? Well, we saw a demonstration of the issue during the Black Lives Matter movement, where instead of highlighting the interesting research that economists have done, including economists of colors, on the issue of racial discrimination and other injustices in the context of the progressive awakening of the sentiment that something was very wrong in the relationship between Black and white population in the US, and in particular in how Black population has been treated over time. Instead of insisting on that, the press highlighted the fact that the profession is in fact an extremely white profession. And thanks to, perhaps due to not particularly subtle behavior of some of the members of our professions, the headlines was more along this headline from the New York Times: economics dominated by white men is roiled by Black Lives Matter. And then reference to this particular accusation. And later there were more articles about that maybe we don't publish enough on these issues in the professions. I don't know if I agree with that, but I certainly would agree with the fact that economics is dominated by white male as a field. And that's highly problematic because for two reasons. First of all, because it's a social science, and you think it would be very difficult to understand society without having, as part of the profession who seeks this understanding, a broader view, and that represents all corners of societies. And secondly, because economists end up being found across positions of power and influence all over societies, in particular in central bank. And in any effort to diversify the central banks has to start with an effort to diversify the economic profession, and in particular the pipeline of young economists. And this pipeline is very problematic. So the challenge is huge. There is a clear lack of diversity, both as far as women and as far as underrepresented minorities. 35% of economics BA were awarded to women, despite the fact that overall more than half of the BAs were awarded to women. 5% of economics major were Black students, and 5% of all economics degree conferred were to women from underrepresented minorities. So this is a profession which is in fact dominated by white male, and this is something which hasn't progressed as much in economics as it has in other fields, like for example in the STEM fields, after a realization that there was a problem in the last few years. So researchers have identified 3 barriers to improving diversity and inclusion in the field. The first one is about perception and information issues. So the issues that economics is mainly about perhaps what central banks think about microeconomics and thinking about GDP and the inflation and going into finance and making money and so on. And that a lot of students from underrepresented minorities or female students, if they are interested in a particular field, it's often because they are interested in the ramification that it could have for society. And if they see economics mostly as a place that you go to prepare yourself for a career in finance and business, then it interests them much less than if they think that this is the place where we discuss all of the important issues that societies face, including interest rate, but not only, also including climate change and social inequality and so on. The other barrier that stands in between underrepresented minority, women, and a successful career in economics is what has come to be called a hidden curriculum. So the idea that to succeed in economics, or you need not only to do well in your classes, but you need to have, say, been a research assistant and to be able to know how to use Stata or R or other packages. And that's not really taught in class, but this is something that you kind of pick up along the way if you know that you have to pick it up. And if no one is there to tell you what is part of the hidden curriculum, then you cannot pick it up. And the third, more directly, is a hostile environment. So this has been documented for women in particular, with papers showing how women face more complicated questionings, how credit is more given to men than to women on co-authors paper, and so on and so forth. But of course, the reason why it's not been identified for minority is not, I think, because there is not a problem, but because there are so few minorities anyways that it's very difficult to even have enough sample to document that hostile environment quantitatively in published papers. But certainly a lot of members from underrepresented minority voiced that concern. So it's not something that has gone unobserved. I think the economics profession was a bit slow in realizing that this is something that could be that could and should be dealt with compared to the other field. But now there is an effort. So many of our peer organizations are tackling the lack of diversity and inclusion in the field in different ways. The American Economic Association has a summer program that prepares underrepresented minority for PhD program in economics and related field. And in fact, a fifth of PhDs awarded to underrepresented minorities were coming from graduates of this program, showing its importance. The Minnesota Center for Diversity in Economics is an institution that tries to aim to increase gender and racial diversity through a number of programs. The SADI Collective equips and empowers Black women in quantitative science through programming and mentorship. In this landscape, what did we decide to do through the Economics Transformation Project, which is a project that is led, that I lead at JPAL with Amy Finkelstein and with our wonderful team there, including Jadna Amador and Toby Chaiken. So the idea is to create a more diverse, equitable, and field of economics by addressing those 3 barriers to entry along the pipeline. So going all the way from high school to admission into a PhD. So this, and all the way we want these 3 barriers in disparity in access to the knowledge on economics, the hidden curriculum, programs that provide technical skills, and mentorship and networking opportunities throughout the pipelines. So to do that, we have 2 initiatives that are complementary, that work together. One is the entire economic transformation project, which has this full pipeline idea, and one component of it, but which is ahead of it in a sense in terms of its execution in some ways, is a DEDP Micromasters, which is a blended program that I'm going to describe in more detail. So let me spend some time on the two projects. So the objective of the economic transformation project is to sort of progressively work along the entire pipeline. So in high school, we try to understand what's the issue. In college access, why are students who are college bound not choosing economics? Then we work on programs to spark interest in economics among URM high school students. So what we have already done is introduction to economics workshop at high school and college access program. We are now in active discussion with MIT online, MIT X Online venture to see whether we could make some of MIT's classes available to high school students alongside with mentoring. And third is programs to provide skill building opportunities for undergraduate and predoctoral scholars from underrepresented minorities. So we provide stipend to attend our existing research staff trainings, which are precisely designed to give this type of programs, custom workshop and training for partner organizations as well. What we are planning to do in the future is basically extend this, where we started with a high school student. We want to grow with a high school student, but also expand to college students by developing a mentorship program and an advisory group for college students. Work with partners to and create a learning community of organization to work together to diversify economics, to sort of share finding and share kind of opportunities, and develop a curriculum for a coding and statistic masterclass online and offline to provide skill building opportunities for undergraduates and pre-docs. One of the and then our third initiative that is both happening and in the future is our Micromasters blended masters. So the reason why it's also already present in future is that the DDP is already going on, but it's currently focusing on international students. And the inspiration for the DEDP was that there is a high demand around the world for rigorous analytic and empirical training in development economics. The current training opportunities are limited and very, very expensive. You have to spend 2 years to get a very good master's program at the Kennedy School, for example, or the Woodrow Wilson School. This is not available for most people. And so we thought there's a gap to fill for a program that is just as rigorous, but is a little bit less expensive and less time consuming. So how do we make it work? Well, we created a program which is a Micromasters, which has a suite of online courses, which are upper level MIT undergraduate classes. People have to take 5 online classes online that corresponds to a semester, but they can take it over more than a semester. There is micro, statistics, and data science, and then 2 courses of development economics, some elective in political economy and the like. When they're done, they take proctored exams for each course. And then on the basis of the proctored exam scores, they can apply when they are finished. They first earn a Micromasters credential. And second, they can apply to an accelerated on-campus master's at MIT. If they are admitted based essentially on their performance in the Micromasters, almost regardless of what else they have done. Once they come to MIT, they are given advanced standing for the classes they've already took. So they take 1 semester worth of classes to complete their Masters of Applied Science in 1 year, complete a capstone capstone project, and then they get their degree. So MIT basically took the bold step of saying that a one-year course, including half of it done online, plus the capstone project constitute a Masters of Science credential. This has been, I think, effective at reducing barrier to entry for development economics. It's inexpensive, it's very rigorous, it's flexible. It has been very effective at enlarging MIT. You can see where the people came from for the masters. I think it's safe to say that none of these students would have been admitted to MIT either as undergraduate or as graduate students. And yet they were all admitted on the masters. So that's the first success in terms of enlarging the reach of our work. The second success is that it turns out that the students are actually much better than the students who come to these classes via the regular admission program. You can see here the conditional distribution function of the classes that they took. This is for econometrics, data science, taught by George Angrist. And you can see how, but we have done the same analysis for all the classes that they took in large number. And you can see that the DDP grade stochastically dominate the grade for the non-DDP students in a very clear way. So this was, and now this is for political economy and development, similar graph. And finally, firm, market, trade and growth, again, similar graph, even more striking, if anything, with excellent scores. So the program has been effective at diversifying not only entry into our program, but I think development economics as a whole. Since our first cohort has graduated, students have gone on to the University of Michigan as graduate students, to the World Bank, to IPA, back to their governments and more. So far, we have only 34 total alumni because COVID came a little bit in the middle of our second cohort. You can see it on the photo here, it's a little bit small, but we will enroll 33 students in the coming year to make up for it. So why does that relate to the URM question domestically? It's because now our future plan is with the success and popularity of the DP Master's Program, JPAL and the Department of Economics have begun planning a program focused on domestic social policy issues with focus on diversity and inclusion. We've hired a new faculty director because I was getting stretched out. So Sarah Ellison is in charge of both the current DEDP as well as developing the new. And the unique structure of the Micromasters program can attract URM scholars from all stages of their education, including students fresh out of college, as well as people who are already working. We'll of course need a special outreach to foster interest in communities that are traditionally not well served by MIT. So these are some opportunities to get involved. Central banks could full fund students. We are in need of scholarships. Academic and researchers can participate in our work. Peer organization can participate in learning community. Thank you very much. I'm now going to stop sharing and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Really interesting initiatives and great to see successes already as well. We've got just over 20 minutes for discussion now. So if anyone from the audience would like to come in, please raise your virtual hand. When I call you, you'll be moved from attendee to panelist. Please then turn on your camera and unmute yourself when I ask you to ask your question. And to allow as many questions as possible, please be brief when asking your question. But let me kick off with a question I had. So I understand that you yourself did not think that economics was necessarily for you at first, with what you were learning not really consistent with making the world a better place. Could you say a bit more on what you might tell a young person about why you persevered?
So I actually gave up economics soon after I started it. My undergraduate, my first 2 years of undergraduate was a very general social science and mathematics education. Then in my third year, when I had to pick a major, I decided to pick history and economics. I did 1 year economics and I thought, that's it. This is absolutely, this is not interesting. This is just this. And then I decided to leave for Russia to do my master's degree in history. And there, by chance, I actually ended up working for economists as a research assistant. In fact, I worked, believe it or not, on a project with the Central Bank of Russia. So I suppose it's the central bank that gave me my first exposure to economics. So I was working on this project, which was actually a fascinating project on the explosion of firm-to-firm debt, intra-firm debt. And I had to teach myself all sorts of stuff about how to constitute a random sample of firms, and then we were going to the firms, we were interviewing them, etc. It was great. And then in the context of this project, and then I found another job for the enemy of the central bank, who were the Ministry of Finance, were actually the sworn enemy of the central bank. And so I had this second job, and the two jobs had to remain secret from each other, because otherwise they would be very upset. And in this, I could see that actually economics was not what I was taught in class, that economics was not just about drawing indifference curve and finding the tangent point. It was really extraordinarily influential in determining the course of what was going on in Russia at the time. It was the heart of the economic transition. Critical decisions were taken with economic input. And that's when I decided that it was worth doing economics, because I thought, okay, maybe you have to go through this indifference curve business in order to go back, at the other end of this tunnel and be able to say something relevant on policy. So what I would hope now is that intro economics is progressively changes. In fact, I'm teaching a class for freshmen at MIT, 2 classes, one on development, which focuses on case studies, and one on, general economics and what economics think about, which is more of a, chit chat related to the what's going on in the world today and so on. And to give people already a glimpse of what is the light at the end of the tunnel, to give them the stamina they need to go through the introduction, which is not very exciting for anyone.
Great, thank you. I can't see any hands yet, so I might just ask a follow-up question as well. You mentioned the sort of hostile environment that can be the case in the economics profession, say in seminars and so on. Would you say that as a woman, you sort of have to be strong in the economics profession, or are there other ways to influence?
I think, unfortunately, I think one has to be strong. Maybe this is changing, and this is changing faster in some fields which have more women than others, but in particular in macro, which is relevant for a lot of you central bankers. As long as there are very few women, then the culture sort of self-perpetuates. And the women can only stay if they are willing to play ball with that. So in some sense, there is not much of a choice, that you have to be strong, or you have to pretend that you are strong, which is a little bit difficult. But this changes as soon as there is a slightly bigger group of women, I think. So, for example, if you look at development, which is a field which has much more gender balance, it's a much more. I think the culture there is much calmer and friendly and all that. I also think that it can change. The culture can change without just having a woman there, by virtue of men behaving better. because I don't think people are mean ill. I just think they don't kind of realize that even the culture that they grew up when they're younger is not necessarily the best and most congenial way for everyone, and in particular for women or underrepresented minority. But there are a few things that can be done, simple things like not starting to ask questions until about 10 minutes into the seminar, which we have started to do at MIT, and changes the dynamic actually quite a bit. And I'm finding that these changes kind of take hold, even in fields that are still male dominated. And I'm quite hopeful actually that it can change that it will people will realize it's actually better that way, and it will continue on its own without any particular problem, and become more ingrained, and create a more congenial culture in the next few years. But in the meantime, we just have to endure it.
Great, thank you. I mean, great to hear that changes are afoot, and we're optimistic that will continue. Now I've got a few questions. Brian Doyle, I think you were first.
Lag and getting this to come up. So I found the description of the program that JPAL has rolled out and has enacted. So what advice would you give to other schools and universities on what they can do, what lessons from this program to encourage and prepare more underrepresented groups to pursue careers in economics? And I'm hoping, as a central banker, we also are, big employers of research assistants. Are there any lessons, so we're not training in the same way that universities are, but we're training in a more practical sense. And I guess is there advice or lessons from these programs that you would give to us?
I think the biggest lesson is that our admission process is deeply flawed. And we knew it, right? We know that it's deeply flawed in the sense that it goes to the selection of one narrow type of people, which happen to be more white and more privileged, and perhaps more male as well. But I think what a lot of people in university tell themselves is that this is the cost for excellence, and there is no alternative. And what we are learning in this program is that it just isn't. It's the cost for selecting in a particular way with the grades and the name of the school and the reference that you do know. Because when we went ahead and selected based on performance in the classes and that we want them to take, so for the equivalent for your program is in the task that you want them to do, we actually get better students while getting a vastly more diverse scope. So my advice would be that excuse me, I have to stop this. Someone is trying many different ways to find me. So the lesson is that one could do the same. One should do the same, and there is in fact no trade-off between diversity and quality. And my bet when we started this program was that it would be true, but I really underestimated to what extent. And that there is only a trade-off between our very narrow way of defining quality ex ante, which does not correlate very well with quality ex post, as in grade in our program or performance in the program. And then if one is creative in the admission program, in the admission, one can do much better both on diversity and on quality. So that's why we got really inspired to start the DED, a more domestic issues, domestic policy oriented version of the program, because then we will kind of do outreach towards this population we are looking for. I'm confident we will find students into this program that will be better than our regular, upper level undergrad admit, and more gritty than the PhD, and more scrappy and wanting to do better. So from the point of view of another program, very easy. If it's another program, MIT favors and encourages using our classes as pathways. So what we did with our program, any other university can do with our program. They can use the same exams to give advanced credit and score for entry into their program. And I would definitely advise one to do that, because there is more than 20 students who deserve entry. For the Fed, it's a bit different because you're screening for research assistant. But likewise, you could use our course and look at the performance in our course in the micro and the probability and data analysis course, and say, this is what you're gonna use for recruitment, and de-emphasize grades and recommendations and all of that. And you might think it's a leap and it's dangerous, but my experience suggests that it's not. That the people who do well on this exam will do well being Fed area. If you wanted to be more ambitious, then you would construct something similar that serves your screening purpose even better. But I would think that the combination of the micro plus the data analysis course would do a long way.
Thanks a lot. Chiara, I think, Chiara Scotti, you have a question.
Yes, hi Esther. Good to see you here. So I actually wanted to ask the same question that Brian asked, so I'll switch to a different one. So far we've talked about, or you have talked about, how to select students differently to give them, a different opportunity and to prepare them for becoming an economist. And then Brian asked you about, okay, what can we do as central banks? So I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, which is, after, all of the above. So once you are in the economic field, it's still true that women are a little bit at a disadvantage. And for example, there are studies that show that women are not cited as much as men. They don't have the same opportunities. And so I just wanted to ask, given your experience and your knowledge, on what you've done so far with younger students, what can we do, once you're graduated and you're older, to help out women, or in general minorities, to succeed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing is that there is a safety in numbers. This was kind of the discussion we were having with Julia before, which is that the culture improved just by, and becoming more inclusive just by the virtue of the fact that the group is more diverse. And I think life was much harder for women, 20 years ago than it is now, just because there are a few more women. And I'm hoping it would be easier for underrepresented minority in 20 years than it is now, because there'll be a few more underrepresented minorities. So that's the first lot. We're just getting more people in at the beginning of the pipeline is already going to improve the experience down the pipeline. Now, I take your point that it's not sufficient because there are all the other things that come up. The hidden curriculum catches up, the culture catches up, the sense, imposter syndrome catches up, and one has to kind of tackle this one at a time. So one thing is to make sure that people are feel competent and prepared, and therefore support them. For example, for your research assistants, make sure that there are training opportunities for them. They have experience to anything that they think they should know, but that other peers might know, but they don't know. They have time and resources to learn those before, instead of just feeling competent and staying in the background. The other thing is, it's harder to say, it's hard to legislate that women should be cited as much as men. I don't know how one does that. But anything that can, my experience, because I've worked on women leadership in a very different setup, but in political systems in India, my experience from that research is that there are prejudices that actually changes relatively rapidly with exposure to people you're not used to see in a particular position. So people form stereotypes that someone is able to do this or someone is not able to do this or whatnot. And this stereotype is powerful, and they affect decision and choices, but they're also affected by what you see around you. And therefore, pushing a bit the envelope, making some specific effort, for example, to put women on to make sure that women get equal representation in opportunity to present, even if it forces your nature initially, and it sounds odd to have quotas. Actually, that's kind of a good way of disciplining exposure, and then it will become much more natural. People will realize, oh, women are just as good as presenting, in fact. So now we can, when we have a team which has both women and men, we can send a woman to present. So a little bit of pushing kind of helps kickstarting a process, because when you don't have experience, you kind of revert to what is known as status quo bias, and there is a role in leadership in forcing people out of their comfort zone. So I'll give an example for women presentation, but it could be, I'm sure there are other opportunities there within the institution for, who takes the leadership of a project and so on and so forth.
Super, thank you. And I'm glad you brought up your research on female leadership, which I think is really super interesting. We've got one final question and 2 minutes left. Sarah Sheikh, please.
Hi, Esther. Thank you so much for your talk. I'm a research assistant at the Bank of Canada right now, and I had a question about, well, the past two questions touched on how after recruiting women, retention can be a problem. And I think with the hostile culture in the field, particularly in seminars, there's a bit of a first mover problem in changing the seminar culture. So from your perspective, do you think there are tangible changes that academic institutions and central banks can take, such as introducing a code of conduct for seminars that would help? And do you think that after leading institutions do that, it could successfully permeate and spread across the field?
Yeah, I think so. And not only that, but I think they are, to some extent already doing it. For example, I gave the example of MIT, where we leave 10 minutes to the speaker to speak before they get interrupted. So that might sound very minor, but I think it actually changes. It actually changes the nature. I've given talk in some places where people were very proud to not let the speaker say one word, and we don't have that. One could go beyond that to think about other ways in which people could be mindful in the way that they interact with the speaker in seminars. I'm not sure what they are, but that's it's a failure of my imagination. If we and then I actually think it would be if there are such things that are known to change the culture, which I'm sure someone has researched, then yes, we should implement them. It will, as I was saying, I think it's kind of, even if people find it funny to start with. I remember, for example, for the 10-minute rule, initially at MIT, my colleagues were like, really? Like, this is going to be boring. We are going to miss, we don't want to hear someone talk on their own for 10 minutes. And then now, everybody is quite comfortable with it. I think it's not a rule that they can see that it has not made the experience of attending a seminar either radically different or any worse. So similarly, I think for many other rules you could think about.
Thank you very much. I think we're out of time, but this has been a really fascinating session with great insights. So thank you once again for joining us.